The first time Eliza Moore saved Alexander Bennett's life, she was just doing her job. As the night cleaner at Bennett Enterprises headquarters, she had grown accustomed to the silence of the empty offices, the hum of the vacuum cleaner her only companion during her midnight shifts. At 28, Eliza had learned to find comfort in routines. Cleaning helped pay for her evening classes at the local community college, where she studied business administration with unwavering determination. That particular night, she hadn't expected to find the company's CEO slumped over his desk at 2 a.m., his breathing shallow and his face ashen. Alexander Bennett, 35, self-made billionaire and one of the city's most eligible bachelors, was having a severe allergic reaction. "Mr. Bennett," Eliza's voice trembled as she shook his shoulder. "Mr. Bennett, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Pen," he managed to whisper, gesturing weakly toward his briefcase. Eliza's heart hammered in her chest as she rummaged through his expensive leather briefcase, finally locating the epinephrine injector. With shaking hands, she administered the shot, according to the instructions, then immediately called for an ambulance. She stayed with him until the paramedics arrived, holding his hand and speaking softly, assuring him that help was on the way. "Thank you," he had whispered. His eyes locked on hers with surprising intensity before the paramedics whisked him away. Eliza expected that to be the end of it, just an unusual night in her otherwise ordinary life. She never anticipated that 3 days later, Alexander Bennett would stride into the office building during her shift, his tall frame commanding attention even in the dimly lit lobby. "Ms. Moore?" His voice resonated with authority, a stark contrast to the weak whisper she had heard days earlier. Eliza froze, her cleaning cart between them like a shield. "Yes, Mr. Bennett? You saved my life." It wasn't a question but a statement, delivered with unwavering certainty. "I'd like to thank you properly. Have dinner with me tomorrow evening." It wasn't quite a question, and Eliza felt her cheeks flush. "That's very kind, but unnecessary. Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone would have remained so calm under pressure," he countered, his intense blue eyes studying her with newfound interest. "Besides, I rarely take no for an answer in business or in life." That dinner changed everything. Alexander was surprisingly down-to-earth despite his wealth, listening intently as Eliza shared her dreams of finishing her degree and starting her own business someday. He spoke of his own humble beginnings, the struggles he had overcome to build his company from nothing. By the end of the evening, Eliza felt a connection she had never expected with someone from such a different world. What followed was like a fairy tale. Alexander began finding reasons to stay late at the office, their conversations stretching into the early morning hours. He took interest in her studies, offering insights from his own experience in business. Within weeks, their professional relationship had blossomed into something much more personal. "I've never met anyone like you," he admitted one night, his fingers intertwined with hers as they stood on the balcony of his penthouse apartment, the city lights twinkling below them. "Someone so genuine in a world full of people who only want something from me." For 6 blissful months, Eliza found herself living in a dream. Alexander introduced her to his world of luxury and privilege, yet always respected her independence and determination to finish her studies on her own terms. Though she eventually accepted his offer to move from night cleaning to a day position in the company's administrative department, she insisted on earning her place through hard work. "You know I could give you anything," Alexander would say, frustrated by her stubborn refusal of his more lavish gifts. "That's exactly why I can't accept," Eliza would reply. "I need to know I've earned my place in your world." What Eliza didn't know was that her presence in Alexander's life had created waves of discontent, particularly with Victoria Sinclair, the company's ambitious marketing director, who had set her sights on Alexander long before Eliza entered the picture. Victoria was everything Eliza was not: sophisticated, well-connected, and ruthlessly ambitious. She watched the budding romance between the CEO and the former cleaner with calculating eyes, biding her time and planning her move. The opportunity came during the company's annual charity gala. Eliza had been nervous about attending such a high-profile event, feeling out of place despite Alexander's reassurances. While she excused herself to the powder room, Victoria approached Alexander, champagne flute in hand and sympathy in her eyes. "She certainly made quite an impression on you," Victoria commented, standing closer than necessary. It's very admirable, you know, helping her climb the corporate ladder so quickly. Alexander frowned. Eliza has earned every opportunity based on her own merit. Victoria's perfectly manicured nails brushed his arm. Of course she has, darling. But you might want to see this before you continue playing Prince Charming. She slipped a folder into his hands. Everyone has secrets, Alex. Even your precious Eliza. Inside the folder were fabricated documents suggesting Eliza had been feeding information about Bennett Enterprises to a competing company, using her position and relationship with Alexander to gain insider knowledge. I didn't want to believe it either, Victoria whispered, her voice dripping with false concern. But the evidence is quite compelling. I thought you should know before things go any further. When Eliza returned, she immediately sensed something had changed. Alexander's warmth had vanished, replaced by a cold, professional demeanor that left her confused and hurt. He barely spoke to her for the remainder of the evening, and when he finally drove her home, his grip on the steering wheel was so tight his knuckles turned white. Is everything okay? Eliza asked softly as they parked outside her apartment building. I need some time to think, he replied, not meeting her eyes. Some things have come to light that I need to process. Eliza went to bed that night with a sense of foreboding, unaware that the fairy tale she had been living was about to shatter. She couldn't possibly know that Victoria's web of lies was already tightening around her, threatening everything she had worked for and the man she had come to love. The following morning, Eliza arrived at work to find her access card denied. Confused, she approached the security desk, where the guard avoided meeting her eyes. I'm sorry, Ms. Moore. I've been instructed to escort you to HR. The walk to the Human Resources Department felt like the longest journey of Eliza's life. Each step echoed in the marble hallway as curious eyes followed her progress. Inside the sterile office, a tight-lipped HR director informed her that her employment was being terminated, effective immediately. On what grounds? Eliza asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Corporate espionage. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. We have evidence that you've been sharing confidential information with Westfield Industries. Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. That's impossible. I would never... Mr. Bennett has personally reviewed the evidence. Your personal items will be delivered to your home address. The HR director slid a severance agreement across the desk. Sign this, and the company won't pursue legal action. I need to speak with Alexander, Eliza insisted, refusing to touch the document. Mr. Bennett has made it clear he doesn't wish to have any contact with you. Devastated and confused, Eliza found herself standing on the sidewalk outside Bennett Enterprises 20 minutes later, clutching a small box containing her desk plants and framed degree certificates. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. I trusted you. Don't contact me again. For a week, Eliza tried desperately to reach Alexander, calling his office, his home, sending emails that went unanswered. Finally, she received a cease and desist letter from the company's legal department. The message was clear: stay away or face consequences. Unable to find another corporate position with the stain of termination for cause on her record, Eliza was forced to take a job waiting tables at a diner near her apartment. Her dreams of completing her business degree seemed to evaporate as she struggled to make rent. The whispers followed her, how she had seduced the CEO, how she had been a corporate spy all along. You shouldn't let him destroy you like this, advised Mia, her closest friend and roommate, as Eliza sat staring blankly at the television one evening. On screen, Alexander Bennett stood beside Victoria Sinclair at a charity event, her arm possessively linked through his. It's hard to fight back when you don't know what you're fighting against, Eliza replied, clicking off the TV. I still don't even know what evidence they claim to have. Mia, a computer security specialist, frowned thoughtfully. Maybe that's where we should start. Let me see what I can find out. Through Mia's connections, Eliza finally discovered the fabricated documents Victoria had presented to Alexander. Emails that appeared to be from Eliza's account, meeting schedules with Westfield executives, bank transfers that had been photoshopped to look like payments for information. These are obviously fake, Mia exclaimed, examining the documents. The metadata doesn't match up. Someone created these to frame you. But who would go to such lengths? Eliza wondered aloud, though deep down she already suspected the answer. Determined to clear her name, Eliza began investigating, starting with the dates of the supposed meetings with Westfield Industries. For one particular meeting, she had an ironclad alibi. She had been with Alexander at his family's lake house, completely off the grid. He should have known these were fake, Eliza realized with a sudden pang. He didn't even ask for my side of the story. Meanwhile, Alexander's life had taken an unexpected turn. Though Victoria had smoothly stepped into the role of supportive partner, something felt hollow in his relationship with her. He found himself constantly comparing her calculated responses to Eliza's genuine warmth, her strategic career moves to Eliza's honest determination. During a late night at the office, Alexander discovered Victoria using his computer while he stepped out for a conference call. Though she quickly closed whatever she was viewing, her flustered explanation raised his suspicions. Later that week, he received an anonymous email containing security footage from the night of the charity gala, showing Victoria entering his office and accessing his computer. The message simply read, "She's not who you think she is." Troubled, Alexander began quietly investigating, asking his head of security to review the evidence against Eliza more thoroughly. What he discovered left him cold. The documents had been expertly forged, but they were forgeries nonetheless. The emails contained phrases Eliza would never use. The meeting times conflicted with moments he knew she had been with him, and the supposed bank transactions had been manipulated. How did I miss this, he asked himself, staring at the report his security team had compiled. The answer was painful but clear. He had been so afraid of being used again, so conditioned by past betrayals, that he had been all too willing to believe the worst of Eliza without giving her a chance to defend herself. When confronted, Victoria's perfectly composed facade cracked. "She was nobody!" she hissed, her elegant features contorted with rage. "A cleaning woman. You were making the company a laughingstock, parading her around at events. I did what was necessary." Alexander fired Victoria on the spot, but the damage to Eliza had already been done. When he tried calling her, his calls went straight to voicemail. The address he had for her was vacant. She had moved without leaving a forwarding address. His private investigator discovered she had taken a job at a small diner, but had recently quit. She had vanished from social media, leaving no digital footprint to follow. For the first time in his life, Alexander's wealth and influence proved useless in finding the one person he desperately needed to see. 6 months passed. Alexander threw himself into his work, expanding Bennett Enterprises with relentless focus while privately continuing his search for Eliza. The guilt of how quickly he had condemned her, how thoroughly he had failed to protect her from Victoria's machinations, weighed heavily on him. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Alexander found himself in a small bookstore in a neighborhood he rarely visited. As he browsed absently through the business section, a familiar voice reached his ears from the adjacent cafe. "The key to a successful small business is understanding your community's needs," Eliza was saying. "Big corporations miss this personal connection." Alexander froze, his heart pounding as he peered through the bookshelves. There she was, sitting at a small table with 3 young women, gesturing animatedly as she spoke. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, highlighting her delicate features, and there was a new confidence in her posture. "That's why I started this mentorship program," she continued, "to help women entrepreneurs avoid the pitfalls I encountered in corporate America." Alexander watched, transfixed, as Eliza expertly guided the conversation, offering practical advice with the same thoughtful intelligence that had first drawn him to her. She had built something new from the ashes of her former life, something entirely her own. As the meeting concluded and the women gathered their materials, Alexander stepped back, suddenly uncertain. Did he have the right to disrupt her life again, to seek forgiveness for a betrayal so complete? Before he could decide, Eliza looked up, and their eyes met across the crowded room. The recognition in her gaze, followed by a flash of pain, told Alexander everything he needed to know. The damage he had caused ran deep, and second chances might be more than he deserved. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The bookstore bustled around them, customers browsing shelves and baristas calling out coffee orders. But Alexander and Eliza remained frozen in their own pocket of stillness, connected across the room by a gaze that carried the weight of their shared history. Eliza recovered first, gathering her papers with deliberate movements, her expression carefully neutral as she said goodbye to the women she'd been mentoring. Alexander watched as she whispered something to one of them, then headed toward the exit without looking back. "Eliza, wait," Alexander called, weaving through the crowded store. He caught up with her on the sidewalk outside, where rain fell in a gentle mist. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." She turned slowly, her eyes guarded. "I don't think we have anything to say to each other, Mr. Bennett." The formality stung worse than a slap. "I know what Victoria did," he said quickly before she could walk away. "I know the documents were forged. I know I made a terrible mistake." "A mistake?" Eliza repeated, her voice steady despite the emotion flickering in her eyes. "You destroyed my career, my reputation, my life, without even asking for my side of the story. That's not a mistake, Alexander. That's a choice." Alexander flinched at the truth in her words. "You're right," he admitted. "I have no excuse. I let my past experiences make me suspicious, and Victoria played on those fears perfectly. But not a day has gone by that I haven't regretted what I did to you." A bitter smile played at Eliza's lips. "And I'm supposed to be comforted by that. Your regret didn't help me when I couldn't pay my rent, when no company would hire me, when I had to restart my entire life from scratch. Tell me how to make it right," Alexander pleaded, rain beginning to dampen his expensive suit. "Anything. Name it." "That's exactly your problem," Eliza replied, shaking her head. "You still think everything can be fixed with your money or power. Some things can't be bought back, Alexander." She turned to leave, but hesitated. "What happened to Victoria?" "She's gone. I fired her the day I discovered the truth. She's been blacklisted from every major company in the industry." Eliza nodded slightly. "At least there's that." She checked her watch. "I have to go. I'm teaching a business class at the community center in 30 minutes. "Please," Alexander said softly, "can I walk with you? I just want to know how you're doing." Something in his voice, perhaps the raw honesty, seemed to reach her. After a moment's consideration, she nodded reluctantly. As they walked through the rain-dampened streets, Alexander learned how Eliza had rebuilt her life after leaving Bennett Enterprises. With Mia's help, she had secured enough evidence to clear her name legally, though the professional damage had already been done. Unable to return to corporate work, she had used her savings to complete her business degree and started a small consulting practice, helping women entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. "The irony isn't lost on me," she said as they paused at a crosswalk. "Being wrongfully accused of corporate espionage actually forced me to create the business I'd always dreamed of starting." "You've done amazingly well," Alexander said, genuine admiration in his voice. "I always knew you would." Eliza's expression softened slightly. "It wasn't easy. There were nights I didn't think I'd make it." When they reached the community center, Alexander stopped at the entrance. "Thank you for letting me walk with you. Would it be too much to ask if we could continue this conversation sometime, maybe over coffee?" Eliza studied him for a long moment. "I don't know, Alexander. Some wounds don't heal easily." "I understand," he said, though disappointment washed through him. "But if you ever change your mind—" He handed her his business card on which he'd written his personal number. To his surprise, she took it, tucking it into her pocket without a promise either way. The next week brought an unexpected development. A major business magazine published an exposé on corporate sabotage, featuring Victoria Sinclair's actions against Eliza as a central case study. Alexander was stunned to discover that Eliza had granted an interview, telling her side of the story publicly for the first time. The article described how a talented young professional had been framed and discarded by a powerful corporation, only to rise from the ashes and create a successful business helping other women overcome similar obstacles. While Eliza never directly blamed Alexander in the piece, his failure to investigate the accusations before acting was clearly implied. The morning the article was published, Alexander's phone rang with calls from board members concerned about potential fallout. His PR team scrambled to draft a response, but Alexander silenced them all with a decision that shocked everyone. "I'm going to publicly admit my mistake," he announced during the emergency meeting. "No spin, no damage control, just the truth." Against his advisor's recommendations, Alexander issued a personal statement confirming every detail in Eliza's account, accepting full responsibility for his failure to investigate properly, and announcing a new company initiative to establish ethical guidelines for internal investigations. The statement ended with a personal apology to Eliza for the professional and personal harm his actions had caused. The business world buzzed with the unprecedented move, a CEO openly admitting such a significant error in judgment. Some predicted it would damage Bennett Enterprises, but others praised the transparency as a bold new approach to corporate accountability. 3 days after his public statement, Alexander received a text message from an unknown number. Coffee, tomorrow, 2 p.m. at Riverside Cafe. His heart raced as he arrived at the small cafe overlooking the river. Eliza was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee waiting. She looked professional in a simple blue dress, her new confidence even more apparent than during their chance meeting. "I read your statement," she said as he sat down. "That couldn't have been easy." "It was the least I could do," Alexander replied. "The truth is, I've spent months trying to find you, to apologize properly. When I saw you in that bookstore, it felt like a second chance I didn't deserve." Eliza's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. "I was furious when I saw you there. All the pain came rushing back." "I understand. I wouldn't blame you if you never forgave me." "That's just it," Eliza said, meeting his eyes directly. "I spent months being angry, letting what happened define me. But eventually I realized that holding on to that anger was only hurting me. The business I've built, the women I've helped, none of that would have happened if things had turned out differently." "You turned a nightmare into something remarkable," Alexander acknowledged. "That strength is what I've always admired about you." They talked for hours, the afternoon sun casting golden light across their table as they navigated the complicated terrain of their shared past. Eliza described the devastating weeks after her termination, while Alexander confessed how empty his success had felt without her in his life. "What Victoria did was despicable," Eliza finally said. "But your willingness to believe the worst of me without question, that was what truly broke my heart." Alexander nodded, accepting the painful truth. "I've spent my life building walls to protect myself from betrayal. When Victoria presented those documents, I let my fears override everything I knew about you. It's the biggest regret of my life." As their conversation drew to a close, Alexander gathered his courage. "I know I have no right to ask, but is there any chance we could start again? Not necessarily where we left off, but maybe as friends?" Eliza considered his question with thoughtful eyes. "I don't know if we can ever go back, Alexander. Too much has happened." His heart sank, but he nodded in acceptance. "But," she continued, surprising him, "maybe we can go forward instead, slowly, one step at a time." As they left the cafe, walking along the riverside path in the golden afternoon light, Alexander felt something he hadn't experienced in the months since losing Eliza: hope. The path to redemption would be long and uncertain, but for the first time he believed it might be possible. What neither of them realized was that their story had captured public attention in unexpected ways. The magazine article, followed by Alexander's unconventional apology, had resonated with people far beyond the business world. Their narrative of betrayal, resilience, and potential redemption had become a symbol for something larger, the possibility of genuine accountability and second chances in a world that rarely offered either. Over the next several months, Alexander and Eliza cautiously rebuilt their relationship, this time on more equal footing. What started as occasional coffee meetings evolved into weekly dinners, where they discussed their work, their dreams, and gradually the deeper wounds that still needed healing. "I've been thinking about your mentorship program," Alexander said one evening as they shared a quiet meal at a neighborhood restaurant they had come to favor. "The foundation I established after everything has resources that could help expand your reach." Eliza set down her fork, her expression guarded. "Alexander, I've worked hard to build my business independently. I'm not sure I want Bennett Enterprises involved." "Not as Bennett Enterprises," he clarified quickly. "The foundation operates separately, and I wouldn't have any control over how the funds are used. You'd maintain complete autonomy. He hesitated. "I believe in what you're doing, and I want to support your vision, not direct it." The sincerity in his eyes made Eliza soften. "I'll think about it," she promised, "but only if we establish clear boundaries." That conversation marked a turning point. As winter melted into spring, Eliza cautiously agreed to collaborate with Alexander's foundation on a series of workshops for aspiring female entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. Working together professionally revealed new dimensions to their relationship. Eliza witnessed Alexander's genuine commitment to making amends not just to her, but to the wider community affected by corporate power imbalances. Meanwhile, Alexander saw firsthand the remarkable leader Eliza had become. Her natural empathy combined with hard-earned business savvy made her an inspirational mentor to women who had faced similar obstacles. The strength that had drawn him to her initially had only deepened through adversity. During the Foundation's spring gala, Alexander found himself watching Eliza from across the room as she confidently networked with potential donors. She wore a simple emerald dress that contrasted beautifully with her dark hair, now grown out past her shoulders. When she laughed at something one of her mentees said, the sound carried across the room, catching his attention like it always had. "You're still in love with her," observed Margaret, Alexander's no-nonsense board chairwoman, appearing beside him with a knowing smile. "Have you told her?" Alexander sighed. "It's complicated, Margaret. I hurt her deeply." The older woman raised an eyebrow. "Life's too short for dancing around what matters. Trust me on that." Later that evening, as they walked through the botanical gardens adjacent to the venue, the fragrance of spring blossoms filling the air, Alexander finally found the courage to broach the subject that had been lingering between them. "Eliza," he began, his voice uncharacteristically nervous, "these past months, working together, seeing you nearly every day, it's made me realize something I think I've known all along." She turned to face him, moonlight illuminating the cautious hope in her eyes. "What's that?" "I never stopped loving you," he confessed. "Even when I thought you had betrayed me, even at my angriest, something in me couldn't let go of what we had. And now, knowing you again, seeing the incredible woman you've become, my feelings have only deepened." Eliza was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "I've been afraid to admit this," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I never stopped loving you either. That's why your betrayal hurt so deeply. It's why I was so angry for so long. I know I don't deserve a second chance." Eliza stopped him with a gentle touch on his arm. "This isn't about deserving. We're both different people now. What happened changed us both. For the better, I hope," Alexander said, daring to take her hand in his. "In many ways, yes." She didn't pull away. "You're more thoughtful, more willing to question yourself, and I'm stronger, more independent than I ever would have been otherwise." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their history and the possibility of their future hanging in the balance. "So where does that leave us?" Alexander finally asked. Instead of answering, Eliza rose on her tiptoes and kissed him softly, a gesture that held both forgiveness and promise. When she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. "It leaves us here," she said simply, "beginning again, but with our eyes wide open this time." Spring turned to summer, and their renewed relationship blossomed alongside Eliza's expanding business. With the Foundation's support, her mentorship program had grown to serve women across 3 states, her success story inspiring others who had faced workplace injustice. Alexander, too, had undergone a transformation. The experience had humbled him, making him a more compassionate leader. Bennett Enterprises implemented new policies to protect employees from false accusations, and Alexander personally reviewed any serious personnel matters before action was taken. One warm July evening, Alexander surprised Eliza with a picnic at the community garden, where she volunteered teaching business basics to neighborhood residents. As they sat on a blanket surrounded by flourishing vegetables and flowers, he presented her with a small velvet box. "Before you panic," he said quickly, noting her wide eyes, "this isn't what you think." Inside was not an engagement ring, but a key. "What's this?" Eliza asked, confused. "It's the key to a storefront on Maple Street," Alexander explained. "The perfect location for the women's business center you've been talking about starting. It's yours, no strings attached, no foundation involvement unless you want it. Just a gift from me to you as a believer in your vision." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes. "Alexander, this is too much." "It's not nearly enough," he countered gently. "You once told me I thought everything could be fixed with money or power. You were right, but I've learned that what really matters is showing up, listening, supporting someone's dreams on their terms, not yours." So Eliza looked from the key to Alexander, seeing in his eyes not the entitled CEO who had once dismissed her so easily, but a man who had learned from his mistakes, who valued her strength and independence as much as her love. "Thank you," she whispered, closing her fingers around the key. "Not just for this, but for becoming someone I can trust again. That's the greatest gift." As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the garden, Alexander took Eliza's hand. "I know we've been taking things slowly, and I respect that, but I want you to know where I stand. I love you, Eliza Moore. I love the woman you were when we first met, and I love the even more remarkable woman you've become. Whatever happens between us, that won't change. Eliza smiled, the last of her reservations melting away as she leaned against his shoulder. "I love you too," she said softly. "Enough to risk being hurt again, which is saying something." 6 months later, on a snowy Christmas Eve, Alexander proposed properly, not with an extravagant gesture, but during a quiet moment at Eliza's newly opened women's business center, surrounded by the physical manifestation of her dream. This time, the ring he offered represented not just love, but a hard-won trust and respect between two people who had learned that true partnership required both. Their wedding the following spring was intimate, but joyful, attended by the women Eliza had mentored and the colleagues who had stood by Alexander through his public reckoning. Mia, now Eliza's business partner, served as maid of honor, while Margaret, who had pushed Alexander toward honesty from the beginning, beamed proudly from the front row. In his vows, Alexander spoke of redemption and second chances, of learning that love without respect was empty. Eliza spoke of forgiveness and growth, of building something stronger from broken pieces. As they shared their first dance as husband and wife, Eliza whispered, "Did you ever imagine, when you found me giving you that EpiPen in your office, that we'd end up here?" Alexander smiled, holding her close as they swayed to the music. "Maybe not here specifically," he admitted. "But even then, I knew you were someone extraordinary, someone who would change my life. For better or worse," Eliza added with a soft laugh. "Definitely for better," Alexander replied, kissing her gently as their guests applauded. "Even through the worst, you brought out the best in me, and that's the truest kind of love there is." In the years that followed, their story became something of a modern fairy tale, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. It spoke to redemption, to the possibility that people could learn from devastating mistakes, that forgiveness could be earned through consistent action rather than grand gestures, and that sometimes love was strong enough to weather even the most painful betrayals, emerging scarred but unbroken on the other side.